Hey there, I'm Scott, and this is Tangents. Um, it is Thursday, the 2nd of March, 2023, and I'm recording this at 20:57. Um, Up until about an hour ago, I thought it was Wednesday, so that's kind of the state that I'm in. I've had a disconnect from the calendar for a long time, but was shocking to me this evening when there was a Zoom meeting I was gonna do tonight, and I thought it was tomorrow, and then I realized like midway through it was tonight, and it shook me a little bit. It's like, oh, I did not mind missing it, but I wouldn't have minded going. And anyway, just kind of shaking my head at being that disconnected from time. So I have less than probably the normal amount of stuff to talk about. I could talk about a lot of stuff probably, but I don't really know what to say. I was watching something on Netflix tonight, and I'm trying to find some stuff to practice Japanese, and especially like listening to it. Um, and I've never been really interested in cartoons or anime. There's a lot of that stuff. So I've been kind of avoiding that. But there's not a load on Netflix. There's a surprising amount actually, but it's more sparse. There's a decent amount of French stuff too. But somehow a lot of even more Korean stuff than either. But I was going through the international stuff, and they don't have a selection for language, which always bothers me. It seems very, like, it seems obvious to just have that be the filter. I've always wanted it because I want to watch a French show, and I have to go through the thing, and it's like, okay, well, this is Polish, and this is Turkish, and this is German, and like, why is there no easy way to filter through that? I don't know. But yeah, I was going through and went manually yesterday, banged through a bunch of them, and was just checking every single one, see the language, and then if it was Japanese and looked like passable, I added it to my queue. And this one, I don't know how I came upon it, and it's actually pretty weird, and weirder still once you start watching it. But the one that I watched tonight was called, according to the pronunciation guide that Google has, Atelier, something like that. I don't remember how they said it, but it was some horribly American version of Atelier, which is workshop. But it's basically about a sort of lingerie, haute couture kind of company in Tokyo. And it doesn't seem like something that I would be too interested in on the surface. And I'm not really, it's not a domain that I'm particularly attracted to. Although I always want to do this thing called dressing room, which would be essentially like clothes that are very well engineered and fit well, and you can kind of wear them all day, go on trips with them, and they look decent. This is the problem that, you can't see what I'm wearing, but I have a thing where I only want to wear shorts. And fashion is a thing that, even if you're not into it, you're subject to it. Because the way our world works, you can only buy the things that people make. You can't just get your shorts like custom made. I guess if you have enough money you can, but generally speaking, most of us don't. And so the shorts that I want, probably from, to date myself, when I was in high school, when I was in undergrad, sort of long cargo shorts and decent pockets, all this kind of stuff. I have struggled for years to find anything that is below the knee. And even the ones that I can find that are long, in air quotes, they feel short to me. And it's just one of these annoying things that it kind of, the length ebbs and flows, and if you happen to be at the wrong time, you're screwed. At the time that I was getting those, my dad was desperate to wear those stupidly short shorts, which I guess were popular. I don't know if they were popular when he was in high school or if it was just, you know, the 80s, or if maybe the 80s was like the second hit of that, or another hit of that. But whatever it was, he wanted those so much that he actually had a bunch of them custom made. And I must have gotten the same gene, although it's expressed itself in a different way, because if I had the money and the, you know, I'm like this close to having my shorts custom made just because I want them longer. He wanted his shorter. But you know, it's just, it's annoying. You get something that you like and then they stop making it. You know, there was a period where I could get shoes that were like Gore-Tex running or trail running shoes and kind of dark. And the thing that I loved about those was they looked like, obviously they weren't like nice shoes, so to speak, but you could wear those around a city and they looked decent. You wear those with some jeans or something. And the great thing is, like, if there's a mud puddle or something, which there often are. Yeah, in Paris, you'll walk around and you'll step in a puddle more, you know, more often than you probably like. And if you have those shoes, it doesn't fucking matter. And I had them and I loved them. And then, like all things, you know, they wear out eventually, and like had no arch, just were flattened out. And the next ones that I got were not as good, and now the ones that I have are kind of like, the previous set of shoes that I got were like super trailsy, because that was all that I could find. When I got my latest ones, I was able to find something that's kind of dark, but it has at least, you know, a few like highlights that are quite intense for me. And I'm just not a fan of drawing attention to yourself. I mean, you might notice if you're watching, I'm pretty much always wearing a dark color. I'm not like, you know, into that screaming kind of, I actually, when I got my latest shoes, I was at REI, which is often where I go. And I don't know what the fuck I was thinking, but I got a pair of they didn't have the ones that I wanted, like some kind of style that was just dark and subdued. So I thought, fuck it. And I got a pair that were like these fluorescent orange, similar trail running shoes, and they were Gore-Tex, but just bright as fuck. And I wore those for like a day and I just couldn't do it. I ended up taking them back because it was just not me. You know, I'm just, I thought it was one of those things where like you try something new and you're like, oh, this will just be a change. And you know, because there was a time when all the shirts that I had, very long period of my life actually, they were all cotton and they all had just like animal prints or some kind of nature print. That was just my style. And or to quote somebody who I once liked, who was a little bit not super nice to me, but just because I had a style, I didn't have style per her. I think I had my own version of style, but never mind that now. But that was my style. Yeah, it was just kind of like what I did. And those, and then the cargo shorts. I've somehow changed to, I've never liked shirts or any kind of clothing that like has words on it or any kind of text. I feel very self-conscious, even if it's just like my Patagonia jacket with a little logo on it and it says Patagonia. I would rather not have that. I like the jacket, but anything like that, I'm just averse to. And you know, I somehow went from the animal prints to, like, I wanted something that had a little bit of something to it and wasn't plain, and that was what I landed on. And that was like, at one point in time I had hundreds of these shirts, like a ridiculous, ridiculous amount. Wore them all to the point where they were pretty tattered by the time I finally got rid of them. And it was a little bit of a struggle to bring myself to get rid of them. And it's kind of weird actually thinking about it. I feel a little bit nostalgic for them. Not that I would want them if I had them, because they were all pretty well used. But just thinking about that, it was like hundreds of shirts that I used to wear and got rid of them. But anyway, sorry to blather on. I somehow at some point switched over to the sort of solid, like athletic shirt. And that's been my style for a while. I don't know why I changed. It wasn't like I had this compulsion to do it, but I did. And I thought with these shoes, like maybe this will just be one of those things, like just a random change and it'll stick like the shirts were. And it definitely was not. It was absolutely not a thing that I was going to do. And I think I'm pretty content with that. Like I don't feel the need to branch out there. I will say the jeans versus shorts thing. I like shorts a lot, and I would rather wear shorts than not. Jeans do look better, and I do have, especially after spending, if I go to Europe or when I just spent a month in Japan, come back and I've been wearing jeans all the time, I feel a little bit naked going back to the shorts. I don't think I'm going to change that unless I move to a colder climate, but it's a thing. So anyway, I'm just, normally I'm talking in tangents. Now I'm just not even saying anything particularly about anything. But the reason I wanted to record this tonight, but actually I think I might just let this one lie and not finish it. I just don't have, it's not just that I don't have the energy and the impetus that I sometimes do. I just don't have anything particular to say or anything that I want to say at the moment. I'm actually getting paid, I think, on Tuesday. Today's Thursday again. So I feel good about that. It's been, holy shit, it's in March now. And the last time I got paid was in October. So it's been a while. And that's, I'm kind of, I had a therapy session today. And one of the things that I was talking with Colleen, my therapist, about was just kind of it's this thing I always struggle with, but I'm very aware that I'm a very privileged person in many ways. And the fact that I could not be, not work or not be paid. I mean, I guess I have been working, but not work in the sense of, like getting a paycheck for November, December, January, February. Holy shit, a quarter of the year. The fact that I could do that, that's a point of privilege, right? Now, I'm not wealthy by any means. There are people who could just not work and go on indefinitely. Plenty of those people even. Definitely nowhere near that. I'm, in fact, like scraping the bottom. And it's only been because I've had help from my sister, who's given me a few thousand, and occasionally I've just had, my business partner's given a few thousand here and there, and together with all of that, I've been able to manage barely. Although I was, up until like a week ago, I was, I don't know, like 500 in the hole, and then had like auto pay thing plus late things and a bunch of what are they called, overdraft charges, and all of that together was putting me like 1,000 in the hole, and then it would revert, and then and then finally I talked to the bank. They were able to they were willing to get rid of a couple of overdraft charges, it's one of those things. Like the overdraft charges suck so much. Like when you don't have money and you don't have overdraft protection, or it's totally maxed out, and you get that and it's like, okay, and I just have like a thing on auto pay and it just pulls out and I can't easily stop it. And then it's like, okay, now you're negative 100, and here's a $36 charge, and here's another $36 charge, and now you're negative. And then it adds up. Like I've probably just recently, just since in this quarter, probably I've had like $500 of overdraft charges. Like I can't afford $500 of, and again, I'm aware that I'm privileged there. Like there are people in much worse shape. But it also makes me very aware of like how fucked things are, because even from that point of privilege, things suck. And you feel like you're just being beaten down, and it's just, I don't know, you go back and forth and sort of think like, well, this is not a good situation. I was also talking with Colleen about just I don't know, the necessity of like some of the things we do for work. And it actually, it occurred to me while I was talking with her, there are the jobs which, like collecting the garbage. If people stopped collecting the garbage, we would know very, very quickly. I've said this before, but I've been in New York and Paris during a garbage strike, and you're aware of it, right? It piles up really fast. And in Paris in particular, it was just like literally like mounds of garbage on the street. It was kind of ridiculous. New York was pretty close to that, but Paris was like over the top. And it also, like when I saw this, I was thinking like, why do you guys? I understand why they were striking, but they're gonna have to pick that, and I'm sure they did pick it up when the strike was over. And it's just like, this was a gross mess that you'd have to deal with, and like picking up trash, not out of bins, but off of the fucking street. And it's just like, ugh. But that's an essential thing. Therapy, it occurred to me as one of those things where, like, if she, certainly, like the world's not going to end if the therapists stop practicing, but they're making a real and material difference in a lot of people's lives. Much more so than most jobs, I would say. Because most of us have jobs that, and this is one of the things that I find really problematic about capitalism, and certainly like the current form of it, but I think in general, a lot of people have jobs which are not making the world better. They're not satisfying people. They're not really accomplishing anything. They're not cleaning up the trash. They're not building infrastructure or maintaining it. And if they stopped doing their job, the world would just rumble on and no one would notice. Like really, how many of the people, I mean, not that there are that many people listening to this, but how many of the people that I know have a job where even if it does make a difference, and I'm not saying, it has to be like life or death, but even in the cases where it does matter to some extent, it's not that big of a deal, right? And a lot of people have jobs which are just pencil pusher, like not moving the needle, not doing a damn thing. And I think people become miserable because of this, because they know they have to do it, right? Because the system is set up so that you have to be on that treadmill. But they also are aware that that treadmill is not doing anything for anybody. And in fact, maybe it's actively making things worse in a lot of cases. And it's annoying that we're so stuck in this situation, because I mean, in a weird way, I'm not in any way trying to say like feudal times were better, because by no fucking means, but in feudal times, the serfs at least were doing something essential. Now I definitely don't envy them, but they're like farming and performing services and doing things that, like, if they stopped doing them, it wouldn't necessarily fuck them, but it would make a difference. It would move the needle. Whereas a lot of people now, they're not even doing that. And so the satisfaction people get and the feeling of accomplishment, the feeling that like what you're doing matters, which I think is, I'm not going to say it's like a human need like oxygen, right? But I do think it is kind of, you know, in the Maslow's hierarchy kind of sense, it's up there. It's definitely, you know, a thing that I mean, it makes sense because we evolved in a state where, like, whether or not you did stuff to feed yourself was the difference between life and death. And so it matters to us, and we have that innate kind of urge and desire to do something and to feel like what we do matters. And so many people just, it doesn't. And then you think about it and it's like, well, we could, it's a frustrating thing because there are so many people, again, who are much worse off than me. People on the street, people not being able to eat, kids with ridiculous amounts of school debt. And we could easily, without even noticing, feed all of these people and house everybody and do, you know, not just like minimal subsistence either. Like, people, pretty much everybody could be comfortable. And the idea that we're in this position where people are miserable because the system kind of demands it. It's an interesting thing when you start learning about capitalism and you realize the system is basically set up so that working matters, but you can't have zero. Well, you can, but in principle, you can't have zero unemployment, because if you try that, things break down. And you know, so the system is actually, and people who are doing financial controls at like a government level, they optimize for a certain level of unemployment, which would not be a big deal if you didn't have to work to live. And you know, like if you could have a situation where, like, okay, you're unemployed, but you're not starving, you're not like destitute, you're not on the street, you're not in some kind of horrible situation where you're sitting there and you have like 5 roommates and you have multiple jobs or anything like this. One of the cool things, I've talked about access before, but one of the cool things we have, it's just this disease of like means testing, the neoliberal consensus kind of stuff. But access, welfare, SNAP, all of these things, they're all set up so that, like, if you're absolutely destitute and you have no income at all, you get a pittance, like an absolute pittance, but you get something. And if you make just a little bit too much, you get completely fucked. It gets taken away from you. I met someone, I think it was Tuesday, but I have no sense of time. So a few days ago, I was at a sort of documentary viewing for healthcare. And there's going to be a ballot initiative coming up in the next cycle. So it was sort of talking about that and talking about some of the needs we have. And this documentary was on basically the pharmaceutical industry. And it talked about a lot of things like insulin, which I've talked at length about. But they were also talking about a Hep C treatment, which, just like everything, funded by NIH, both directly for the development of that particular drug, and of course, just like everything, based on many, many years of basic research. So you start adding that stuff up, it's billions and billions of dollars of public money that has gone into it. And the professor who developed it made a sort of startup to monetize it. Everything has to be, it is another thing, like, you can't do art, you can't do something like what I'm doing here and not monetize it. Like, you have to monetize your existence. It's very sick. It's really just disgusting. But anyway, coming back. I'm just thinking about how fucked up that is. Anyway, going back though, like Serenity now. This guy sets up the company, and I think it was Eli Lilly. I don't remember. Maybe it was Glaxo. It was one of these companies. I think it was Lilly, but whatever it was, they bought his company for like $11 billion. And it's a lot of fucking money for something that was made with public funds. And then their answer to this was, okay, this thing is a cure for Hep C. Basically, you take a pill a day for a certain amount of time, and it is curative. And then your liver recovers and all of this if you get it in time. They made it, and the cost of manufacturing these pills, like $1. The cost of NRE, again, covered by NIH and all of these things, the universities and probably NSF and lots of little things like that, but public money. And so the cost of NRE is basically already gone. It's not like you're making a product and you have to recoup that. It's just washed away. And obviously you do have to do clinical trials and all of this. I think they might have been doing that before they were even acquired. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I think maybe. But either way, they start charging $1,000 a pill for this. And people will pay it because if they can, you know, like cure versus dying of hepatitis, you probably pick the cure. But it's one of these things where apparently, like, if you distributed it well, we could eradicate Hep C. Not just, you know, eradicate it. And we didn't do that, and we're not doing that, because they could make insane amounts of money. And to such an extent that, like, the first year they recouped, they didn't have NRE, but they had the cost of acquiring this company. They recouped that. And then they had massive, massive profits beyond that. And it's just such a sick and twisted thing. I mean, it's at the heart of so many problems in our society. And not just, like, I talk about medicine a lot, I talk about drugs, but, you know, academia. It costs, I mean, I always think about this, but first off, the Arizona State Constitution says that, and they should have been more careful with this, to be fair, but it says higher education, public universities basically, should be open to everybody and as nearly free as possible. They should have said free. That as nearly free as possible gives you a little bit of legal wiggle room. And through defunding of the universities, see, I can't say defund the police, but people can defund K through 12, they can defund public schools, and through having this whole thing, and it's not just Crow's fault. The president of ASU has contributed to this greatly, but it's not just him. It's like the whole ecosystem for all of higher education, and the state legislature pulling money, and this and that. Everything has to be like about ROI. It has to be like you're going to school. Even higher education basically is vocational training. You have to return that, you know, first off, you're paying an exorbitant amount. Second, you have to somehow pay it back. So you can do art or things that are not highly remunerative, but you're shooting yourself in the foot. And the system, it's a perfectly rational thing to pick, either not go to school, or if you're gonna go, do something where you're gonna make enough of a delta over what you would have made otherwise that you pay off your student loans. This is not the way it should be. This is not the purpose of education. And it's such a fucked thing. I was talking, not talking, but I got in an argument with some people on LinkedIn, which is my new Twitter. And I was talking to, probably not coincidentally, middle-aged, slightly over middle-aged white dudes. One of them is a retired cop. The other one is a retired, I guess, construction project manager. And I don't remember what the context was exactly, but something came up. Actually, I do remember what it was. Bryan Cranston was on Chris Wallace, I believe, and he was explaining why MAGA is an intrinsically racist term. And he's like, well, if you're black, when was America great? And he says it very calmly and very, like lays it out there and pretty fucking objectively. Like you listen to that, even if you didn't think it already, and then you go, well, shit. If it never was great for you, then what are you making great again? I mean, independent of what he said, also just the fact that like Trump and this whole slogan came as almost a knee-jerk reaction to Obama's presidency, it's pretty fucking obvious that it's an intrinsically racist thing. But these two white dudes are in the comments on this, and they're explaining how bad Breaking Bad was, and it was glorifying drugs and all this, and I get in there and I'm like, it's not glorifying being a drug dealer. I've watched Breaking Bad. It's not making him look like a great guy, but it is a condemnation of our world and especially our country, where somebody gets cancer. And again, it's not a moral or ethical decision to start making meth and then selling it. But in the position he was in, it was a completely rational decision. Like, and in fact, I mean, you look at that and it's like, if more people had the opportunity to do it, they would be better off. Now, that doesn't mean it's good, but imagine what it says when your world is structured in such a way that it rewards you actively for doing something that bad. And these two fucking dudes were just not getting it. And it's one of these things also, like, you're one of these liberals, you're just like mocking us and you're being intellectually superior. And it's like, I'm not being intellectually superior, dudes. You're not getting something that, I mean, it's just their reading of this show was such a sort of surface level child's understanding of what Breaking Bad was that I'm just sitting there and I'm going like, how do you two motherfuckers not get this? And then I'm also thinking like there's another layer to my thinking there, which is like, I'm sure these two are MAGA people. I'm sure they voted for Trump. I'm sure they're Republicans. And I'm just sitting there thinking like, and it's not that I think I'm intellectually superior to these guys. It's just that, I don't know if it's that they're incurious or that they've just never taken any kind of critical thinking course or any kind of analysis of like literature or films or whatever, cinema. But whatever it is, they're not thinking of stuff, they're just not getting it. And they're so far from getting it, and their votes are worth as much as ours. And it's just one of these things where I'm sitting there and I'm like, what the fuck? What the fuck? And then I'm thinking also, like, the meeting tonight was with Gnarl, the one that I missed. And I've lost track of time, but whatever it was, days ago, I went to the state capitol for what they called Lobby Day. And when I was there, it's basically like we go in. Weirdly, I was the only dude. There was one other dude, but there are pictures, and I'm the only dude in the pictures. The other guy like stood off to the side. I think he was with one of the people that were there. But anyway, just thinking about that. We're there, and we're sitting there. We're talking about stuff. We're having the legislators come in, Democrats obviously, because the Republicans definitely don't give a fuck. Well, they give a fuck, but in the wrong way. And then we sat in the galley. And I have to say, I've never sat in the galley. I've been to the state capitol so many times for protests, usually on the weekends. I've never sat in that galley. I've been outside of the House and Senate. Before this, I'd never been in either one of them. And when I went, well, actually one of the things I did was sign up or finish signing up, activate my thing for, what do they call it? Request to speak, which is the system basically made for lobbyists to say, like, this is how I feel you should vote. And by the way, we're giving you some money, so, you know, you'll vote with us if you want more. But it's also there, and, you know, it actually, I have to say, my impetus to, like, talk on Twitter and talk on Facebook and talk on Instagram, when I finally got into this request to speak thing, I got really motivated. I just kept going through bills, and I'm sitting there weighing in. And then later on, I noticed there's a comment thing, but I don't see the comments. It's just like yay or nay, for or against, and if you actually want to speak. I think the comments are in a database someplace, but I'm not sure if anybody's actually seeing them, which bummed me out and then kind of took some of my steam out. And then also, of course, I mean, the one thing that I think would be really useful there is you can see other people's positions, and you could probably go through there, and they're people's names. So you could go through the names and contact them and talk to them and then lobby them directly. Not lobby the legislators, but lobby the people who are lobbying the legislators. And the reason that was something that I noticed is that there's a bill that's specifically like codifying into law that elections have to be plurality. They can't be ranked choice. They can't be approval voting. And this thing was out there, and I saw there were a bunch of people for it, a bunch of people against it, but one of the people for it is someone who I knew, and I saw her, in fact, she's pretty active and has had a kind of leadership role in some of the reproductive health things, and I messaged her on LinkedIn because I saw this, and I was like, why you should change this. This is wrong. You're on the wrong side of this, like, because she was for this bill. And it just bothered me. But anyway, and then it made me think, if I had like free time, if I had all the free time in the world, I would go through those things. I would just find the people directly and get in touch with them and lobby them directly. I don't know that would have any use, but I would totally do it. I'm almost on the verge of the kind of person who would do that anyway, but never mind that now. So yeah, I was watching this documentary, and I see this thing, and people were telling their stories while we're there. And one of the women there was kind of like half hosting and half volunteering. She has diabetes, and she was just sort of explaining like how bad her situation is, and she's on Access, and the Access covers her insulin and some other stuff, and she has a pump, which is great technology, which also heavily invested in by public funds. She has that, but she can't, the rules to have Access are like, you can't have more than a tiny bit of income, like a fucking trickle of income. You can't have, I mean, this one I didn't know, but you can't have savings more than a certain amount. And it's like, you have to be completely destitute and miserable. Not just like destitute, but like you have to be stomped into the fucking ground in order to get the tiny little bit of help that we have. And it's so disgusting. It's so like fucked up. And I'm not saying France is perfect. I'm not saying any other place is perfect. I am saying that in Japan, apparently the whole country has about the same number of homeless people as there are in LA, just in LA. That seems like you're doing something wrong here, you know? I did see homeless people there, but apparently, yeah, slightly disproportionate. I go back to LA, and it's like just walking down the street, and in places just like, I apologize that I've talked about this before, but in places that are like wealthy neighborhoods on one side of the street, and then you got fucking dude living on the street over here, and I don't know, is he on drugs, is he drunk, or is he what? Whatever the fuck, could be taking care of this person, could be helping this person. Yeah, and actually, I mean, I've seen so many studies as well where like literally just housing people, and I don't mean putting them in like warehouse housing. You know, you go to Skid Row in downtown LA, And it is depressing. Like, it's just a bunch of people warehoused, a bunch of people like crammed into these buildings, and then they're like pushed out at a weird time. It's like, it, again, just trying to punish people for being poor. That's not what you should do. Like, you know, if people need medical attention, if people have psychological issues, help them there. But if they're just on hard times, I mean, give them a fucking apartment. There are so many apartments and houses that are just empty. In every city, there are more than enough to put people in them. And not like some little, again, like the projects kind of thing, just a normal fucking place. You could do that. We have so much extra food that we waste. You could easily let everybody eat. And, you know, I'm not saying everybody has to have the gold-plated lobster. You know, you don't need the lobster with gold leaf. But you could eat decently. We can afford that. And the funny thing is, when you see the studies that actually do stuff like this, like house people and feed them, huge fraction of them actually kind of recover, and then they are able to start working and taking care of themselves and doing, which you would think, if capitalism wasn't just a fucking lie, that would be a good thing. Like, that would be a thing that they're going for. Now, personally, to me, I don't think you have to work to earn your existence or your shelter or your food. I think those should be considered human rights. But in the system of capitalism, where people are supposed to do those things, you know, like you have to do that. They're not doing the thing that is most efficient. And at a certain point, you start realizing, like, oh, it's a completely deliberate choice. And, you know, I mean, it's basically, I think there are a variety of reasons for it. One of them is to scare the shit out of the workers so that they're like, oh, and I mean, our whole system is striated like this too. But wherever you are, there's somebody above you where you're like jealous and you're like, oh, they make so much more than I do. And I don't care if you're making 30,000 a year or 80,000 or 800,000 or 8 million. There's always that person above you and you're like, oh, they're making so much more. They're doing so much better than I am. And then there are the people below you that you can look at and you're like, oh, well, at least the $30,000 person is like, at least I'm not on the street. The $80,000 person, at least I'm not the $30,000 person. The $8 million person is like, at least I'm not the $800,000 person. And our whole system is just set up in this fucked up way where everybody's miserable and everybody's scared about, you know, and it's just, it doesn't need to be this way. It is a conscious, deliberate choice. Now, yeah, it's a choice that's made collectively, like, and it's a systems kind of thing. It's not like Bob has decided this is how it shall be. Although there are people who really like the way things are, and there are people with a lot of power. But there are also people who could do something about this, and they don't, and they won't. And again, like, I was in the galley at the state legislature, and I knew the fucking Arizona GOP is insane, to be fair. This is not news to me. And apologies if I'm repeating myself here, but it's something that I think needs to be. I was in there, and in the Senate, I don't even remember the names of the Republicans, but some of the Republicans whose names I've seen, actually, I do know one of them was Kavanaugh. Not the Kavanaugh that we know from the Supreme Court, but just as much of a piece of shit. He's in there, and he's going off in some bullshit thing. It was just like, I was in the gallery, and you're not supposed to say anything. I was like gonna scream at the motherfucker, like, dude, shut the fuck up, you're full of shit. Like, you're completely full of shit. Jesus Christ, what the fuck? But I didn't. I was calm. And then Mitzi Epstein is there, and she's just listening to this stuff and calmly coming back, and, you know, like, and I'm just sitting there, and I'm kind of blown away, actually, that not just her, but all these people the Democrats are able to tolerate this stuff and function in this system. But the Republicans are just fucking pieces of shit. Like, don't get me wrong, I have very little love for a lot of Democratic stuff too. But the Republicans there, they're just so fucking full of shit. And they're doing things like trying to explain how increasing the threshold from 50 to 60% for ballot initiatives to amend the Constitution is a good thing, and is somehow more democratic. Is there? And they're just sitting there and they're lying, and they're not. I guess there are degrees of things like this. There's the person who believes something that's wrong, and then there's the person who knows that it's wrong and is saying it anyway. And then there's there are degrees of lying. There are degrees of being confused. I know these guys weren't confused. They knew. And they're lying, but they're not lying they're not bothering to lie in a way that is even plausible. So it's like, in addition to the fact, this is why it was so annoying to me, because you hear them saying this shit. And it wasn't just these, we stayed in both the House and the Senate for a while. And, it was like this. But we're sitting there and, they're lying like that. They know that they're lying. They know that you know that they're lying. And they're not even pretending it's not just the lie that's bad. It's that they're not even bothering to make an effort. Like, they're just unabashedly lying. It's literally like if you had a kid and you asked the kid, is that $1 in your hand? And they're holding the dollar bill in their hand. And you see them holding the bill, and they see themselves holding the bill. And they sit there and they look at you with a straight face and say no. And then you go back and you're like, well, it looks like a dollar bill to me. No, it's not a dollar bill. And they keep going, and you keep going back and forth. And you're like, at a certain point, you're like, motherfucker, what? How stupid do you think I am? Like, how I can see, obviously, that you have a dollar bill in your hand. You can see that you have it. You can see that I can see that you have it. Why are we bothering with this fucking charade? I would rather these people come out and just say, fuck you. It would be better. It would be favorable. Massively so. If these guys would just go like, you know what? Fuck you. We have the majority by a slim margin, and we're going to do what the fuck we want, and we don't give a shit. That's the message. That, like, one of the things that they did was the bills that come out of these committees have to be heard by the floor and then voted on. And the Democrats who put some bills together worked with some Republicans to get some votes so that they could do it. But then the Republicans changed the rules and I don't know what the number was, but they had to have some number that was in the double digits of Republican signatures on the thing just for it to get on the floor to be heard. And then they wouldn't do it too. Not that that's a reasonable thing, but it's just the lying, the brazenness about it. There's something very just so offensive when somebody has power over somebody else and they use that power and abuse it and twist the knife as much as they can and totally unnecessarily. And you just see that, and it left me with such disgust. Like, I try to be kind of understanding about people, and I try to be like, okay, and there are lots of Republicans who, they do still in massive numbers vote for Trump. So it's hard to say anything positive about them. But you can at least kind of understand, like, I have friends, in the loose sense of the word friend, who, I say that because, just kind of cringing on it, but it's like, I don't know that somebody's a friend when they're doing something that's harmful to other people. Luckily, like, cishet white dude, probably I'm mostly okay. Although, I definitely see, like, haven't been paid for a quarter of a year. And I sit there and I look at the situation and it's like, okay, well, because I did look into this. If I started trying to collect unemployment, it's capped at like $200. I don't remember what the numbers were, but it's capped at some low, ridiculous level. You need to be making a lot of money in order to get that cap. And once you have it, you have to show You have to actively renew it every week, and you have to show that you're making a really strong effort to apply for jobs. And if you get offered a job, you have to take it. And I'm just sitting there, and it's like, it's such I mean, it was to the point where it would literally not be worth it. Like, and again, I mean, not to get into the Walter White thing, but literally would be better off turning to a life of crime. Like, seriously, if I was in the position, if I didn't have my sister and some other support network, I would sit there and I would think that, and I'm not saying I would do it, but it would not be an irrational choice. And I'm not in the worst possible position there. There are a lot of people who are much, much worse off. And presumably my situation is transient. But anyway, I mean, like, these fucking Republicans, I was just losing my mind. And they really, I don't know, I am convinced that a lot of it comes down. I've said this, and I don't mean this like glibly, and I don't mean it in, because there are people who think therapy and these kinds of things are like an insult. Oh, you need to go to therapy, and that would be an insult for them. I think really, like, there's a bunch of like untreated, and I'm sorry for the pop psychology here, but untreated childhood trauma. Their parents, probably their dad, I'm just guessing, one of their parents or both, were abusive and manipulative and really kind of shitty to them. And that was how they grew up. That was normal to them. They never did any kind of therapy afterwards. They never did anything to, like, any kind of self-help or anything to try to get out of that and get past it. And now they're fucking adults. This Kavanaugh guy is a gray-haired old dude. And they're just sitting there fucking with people and doing so many things. Like, I was there for 20 minutes. And in the time that I'm there, like, one thing is the whole, the 60% of the vote. One thing that they're doing is like trying to funnel even more public funds into private schools from these vouchers. And these fucking vouchers, I have to tell you, aside from the fact that, like, property tax, the way that we pay public schools is stupid, and it's not, the schools that don't do well, this is that neoliberal bullshit, but, like, base it on property taxes so that if you're in a poor neighborhood, your school is not well funded. And then we have things where we're like rewarding schools and treating them like a business because everything has to be run like it is such a fucking insane, and I say that not in the sense of being like, again, I'm not being glib and I'm not being ableist there. I'm saying, like, it is detached from fucking reality. That everything, this idea that everything has to be run like a business and everything, like, that's a good thing. Like, schools have to compete with each other and all this. That's not the only way to structure things, and it doesn't fucking work. And what it ends up doing is that the schools that have kids who are socioeconomically disadvantaged, and, like, you look at the difference between somebody who has high socioeconomic status and parents that went to school and went to graduate school. They're reading to their kids. They have free time to spend with their kids working on their homework. There's so much stuff outside of school that's like teeing you up for success. And then if you are working like multiple jobs and you only have a high school degree and you have no history in your family of going even to college, let alone graduate school, your kids are intrinsically disadvantaged going in. They're in the school, and the school is underfunded. I mean, it's like a vicious cycle thing. But the school is underfunded, they've got too many students for every teacher, and even if all the people are trying their best, they're not going to perform as well. And then we reward the school that's performing well, and we punish the school. Like, the real thing to do is, like, that school's not doing well, let's figure out why and do something about it. And this school's doing really well. I'm not saying we need to kneecap them, but, like, they're fine. They're, just keep doing what you're doing. You still probably try to improve everything, but, you look at the ones that are failing. It's exactly the opposite of what we're doing. Instead, we're like, the rich get richer, the poor get poorer, and, oh, by the way, we're also going to give you, air quotes, school choice. And they use the shitty schools that they've made as a justification for this. And this school choice is basically, we're going to give you vouchers. The vouchers are not going to be enough to cover what it would take to put your kids in private school. So if you're poor, you can't actually put your kids in private school. Even if they were enough to cover the tuition, which they're mostly not, they don't cover getting the kid to and from school because there are no school buses because they're private schools. They don't cover a lot of things that are just ancillary. And so the people who end up using the vouchers are people who already fucking had their kids in private school anyway. And they're now just getting this massive hand up because they could afford it already. And if they could afford it and now it's costing them less, that's extra money for them. Meanwhile, the people who can't afford it, their kids are stuck going to a shitty school that keeps getting shittier, keeps having money funneled out of it to feed people who are already fat. It's just like such a fucking disgusting ass backwards way of running I can't call you a civilization, a collection of hominids, you know? You have, it's so fucked up. You have, I'm just at a loss for words. I can't fathom how you could be so sick that you would think that, and again, like, and I'm going to pick on Kavanaugh because he's the only fucking name that I can remember, but these fucking Republicans are sitting there with a smile on their face, smirking about it, and they're like, I know that you know that I know that you know that I know that you know that I mean, they're sitting there just like laughing at it. They're enjoying this. They're happy about it. They're mean, and they know that they have that little bit of power, and I'm sure this old motherfucker was probably like, I don't know if he was beaten or if he was just abused verbally or emotionally or whatever, but I'm sure he had a shitty childhood. No doubt. Does not justify him being an asshole, but I'm sure he did. I'm sure he was miserable. I'm sure his home life was miserable. I'm sure he never did anything to recover from that. And now, yeah, there are some people who, this is a thing about that, because, and again, like, you can understand that without it. It's not an excuse at all, but it helps you understand. There are some people who suffer and are like, okay, I paid off my student loans. I want other people not to have to go through the shit that I had to go through. So I want the loans to be paid off for everybody. And then there are the people who went, well, yeah, I didn't get any kind of, nobody helped me. I didn't, I mean, of course, people helped that person. And of course, never mind that they're a fucking boomer. And when they were going to school, it was either free or so close to free that they could have a summer job at the hot dog stand and pay their tuition and still pay for room and board and beers and whatever the fuck else. So I have a little bit of a problem with that person, but they're also sitting there going like, oh, well, nobody helped me, so fuck everybody else. And they're just gonna fuck everybody else. It's not the right way to respond to things not being ideal for you. I'm sorry, but like you just look at this, and it's not like a couple of anomalous people who are just psychopaths. It's an entire fucking party, And when I say that, I mean, yeah, I'm sure you have friends and relatives. I know people listening to this or watching it have friends and relatives who are in this party. And they're voting for Trump, and they're voting for people like him, who are just, it's just like, it's not moral or ethical or decent, and there's no justification for it. It's not defensible, and it's one of the reasons why I'm having so much trouble, like on LinkedIn, not saying stuff about this stuff, because it matters. And, this whole being polite, there's the whole bystander effect anyway, but there's also a thing where, like, people are not being taught ethics. And if anything, people are almost being taught that being unethical is good and rewarded. Fucking Joe Biden is the president. Joe Biden, creepy Uncle Joe with his hands and smelling the hair, and all this bullshit. Not even getting into Tara Reid. Just the stuff that we know definitively and have video documentary evidence of. That's Joe Biden. Joe Biden, Crime Bill Joe, Put a bunch of fucking people in prison for way, way, way too long for nothing. Strip them of their civil rights. They're not able to vote for nothing, for shit that, that Clinton and Obama did. And fucking Joe Biden, the guy who thought that, integration and having busing would put his kids in a racial, his words, not mine, but a racial jungle or some bullshit like that. Fucking Joe Biden, who made it impossible to dismiss your student loans in bankruptcy. Fucking Joe Biden, who is a plagiarist, a serial plagiarist. And the thing about, I'm not saying people can't make a mistake and then recover. And so, we all make mistakes. We all do things and then we're regretful, and then change. You learn and you change. Joe Biden, I guarantee if you could see him in high school, in college, he was cheating. He was plagiarizing shit. It's not like a one-off thing. It's not just in the 1988 presidential campaign, he was really... There's video of him doing it over and over again. And not just the one that Connie Chung had there. It's a habit. It's who he is. It's in his nature. And he's never been called out on it. He's never been anything but rewarded for it. Yeah, he had to drop out in 1988, but then he became a senator. Then he became a fucking vice president, and then he became president. He got rewarded for it. Trump, grab him by the pussy. Fucking, if you don't say that he's a known rape, he's probably has raped people, but at the very least has come, so close to it that you can't really define the difference. And again, just ridiculous racism, ridiculous, horrible person, huge liar, all of this stuff. And people see that, and they see these people not punished for it. Not that you need to be punished for stuff like this, but, not redeemed anyway, not face negative consequences, but actually both of these motherfuckers became president. This is the society you've built where the just absolute dregs of the earth, these two people, they shouldn't be able to have a job. They should just be, by all means, let them just fucking be in their own little apartment. It'll be a nice apartment. Let them eat comfortably, live comfortably, but not fuck anything up for any other people. Just you guys go off, you do your own thing. That should be their existence. They shouldn't be in positions of power. They shouldn't be rewarded massively. And they shouldn't be held up as an example for people, because that is the exact wrong fucking message that you should be giving people. And it's not just them. It's a whole endemic just disease that, people like that are rewarded. People like Travis K. People like the WeWork Adam guy. I don't feel bad for Elizabeth Holmes by any means. But I always do understand, when she was, and I do think, because she's a she, probably a factor. And if she was a dude, I suspect she'd probably still be running Theranos and not. And also, you've got the being a woman working against her. You also have the fucking over rich people. Elon Musk has kind of fucked over some rich people, but not as much. And he's made a lot of people a lot of money. And, sort of ish. Holmes fucked over some rich people, and you get punished for that. That's what actually matters. But, going back, she was like 18 or something, and she's got this sick, her dad, oh God, the fucking Enron thing. I forgot about that. That the whole, I'm not even going to get into the Enron thing, but that isn't, if you're not familiar with it, fucking Google Elizabeth Holmes Enron, because it's insane. But even without that, she's raised by somebody in this environment where she's being told she's this Wunderkind, and she's just she's so much smarter than everybody else. And, to such an extent that she's got fucking professors at Stanford telling her, this doesn't work. What you're proposing is just not reasonable in principle. And rather than going, oh, well, would this work? Or, oh, could I do this? Or, like learning, figuring stuff out. She believes so much in herself and her own bullshit because of the way she was raised. And again, I feel bad for her because she was raised that way and never really escaped it. But, she got in there and kept going. And then most people who are disconnected from reality would at least like fizzle out and they'd kind of drift off. But she had a bunch of enablers and she had connections, family connections, and then she got millions of dollars and then hundreds of millions of dollars. And it's one of these things, like I still don't even know if she really believed that she was lying. Like it's obvious to all of us, but I feel like I could believe, and this is again not a defense of hers, but I could believe that she was delusional and just ignorant and kind of stupid enough to think that, like there's a really good chance that if they just keep going, they'll figure it out. And you think about that, and that's the kind of thing that our system rewards. And you look at that, and it's just like, yeah. Anyway, it's funny. I was gonna wrap this up because I wasn't going anywhere, and this is what happens. It's why I do this. I do need to go to bed. It's 22:03, so I am gonna put this one out, and I hope that you gritted through that beginning part to get to the meat that was actually there. So with that, thank you as always, and fuck the Arizona and general GOP. Fuck the Democrats too, don't get me wrong, but particularly fuck them. And I would say, like my little call to action, if you have people who you actually know and care about who are voting for these people, have a talk. Have an uncomfortable conversation because they need it. These people should, like the difference between a couple of extra, and again, I have no particular love for the Democrats. They're pretty fucked up too. But if you go to the state legislature and you see what the Republicans are doing with their very, very narrow majority, the difference between what we have now and something that is so much better, that would really matter, is literally a couple of seats. Like, literally take two seats, and then those same Republicans are, now they'd be a pain in the ass, but they wouldn't have the power to do all the shit that they're doing. And they're doing a lot of fucked up shit. So anyway, please have a talk with people. I know it's not comfortable. I know you don't want to do it. And you're not going to know going in, this is important. It's not going to be like a one-time thing. You're not going to convince them. But it is erosion and geology, time and pressure. You're going to have to keep coming back to it. You're going to have to, and not just you're going to have to get a bunch of other people. You're going to have to talk to people over and over again, and you're going to have awkward, uncomfortable conversations and say, like, this is the thing. And you don't have to like come head on. Try different angles, try different approaches, try different things that you can discuss, but try. And it will take time, but I do think there's a chance. I think that, and if you don't do it, we're all kind of fucked. So please consider. That's all I'm saying. With that, for real, Zai Jen.